I mean, I'm just a schmo. Like I got lucky maybe a few times. I've learned some lessons along the way. I've made tons of mistakes, and I'm okay with whatever that is.
What was the whole process of building the Sea Bears like?
It's overwhelming. And to their credit, when we called Mark Chipman and Kevin Donnelly, and okay, Mark, here's a crazy idea. I got a crazy idea. And what happened with us was that a lot of people showed up. They liked our brand, they liked our merchandise, they came to our games. The process of business is you get information, you have to process it pretty quickly and then make a decision. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had some very, very low points.
What are some of those failures? What is something that really struck you either early in your career or later on that really put a toll on you?
The fact that I couldn't get into the U of M law school and then to get rejected, like one after another, letter after letter after letter from every single law school, was just devastating to me. It was probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life.
How does one move on and learn from their failure, right? Like, well, if you're not going to do it, then who else is going to do it, right? You're in that spot.
Is it so bad that I should give up and move on to something else? Or is it just, did I just trip on a stair?
Right.
And do I keep going? I'm ready.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Tool for Ice podcast, the #1 podcast in Winnipeg. Honestly, scratch that, the voice of Winnipeg, where we document the rise and stardom of talent and personalities in our city.
Yeah, we are honored, extremely honored to have our guest today. He's a businessman, a lawyer, and an inspiration to all of us. Please welcome David Asper.
Hi.
How are you?
That's a very hearty round of applause.
Big crowd, big studio crowd, as you can tell. I wanted to start off by saying congratulations, especially with the Sea Bears. You are the chairman and owner of the Sea Bears. Congratulations on that. We've lived in Winnipeg for it's around 10 years, and it's the first time we've seen a basketball team in our city. And it's great to see because we always watch the NBA and all those things and always wish we could go to one of the games. My real question right off the bat is, how does that feel?
It's overwhelming, to be honest with you. Once we decided to take a shot and try to bring pro basketball back to Winnipeg, it's like any entrepreneur. It's who starts a business. You sort of invest a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort, and no matter what research you do or what hopes you have, at the end of the day, you open the doors. You say, "I'm open for business," and you have no idea whether anybody's going to show up.
Right.
And what happened with us, even from the very beginning, was that a lot of people showed up, and a lot of people embraced the idea of pro basketball. They liked our brand, they liked our merchandise, they came to our games, and I find it. I'm very grateful that happened, but I'm also very happy for our staff, because we created 9 new jobs, and these were young people, largely who didn't have experience doing this. I keep saying to them, they were learning to swim in a tidal wave, which was very, very challenging.
Yeah.
But we just had a staff dinner, and the staff are going away for a week to recover, and I'm very happy for them. Because they had an amazing experience, and I'm happy for our fans who had a great experience, and I think we're only getting started. So thank you. I feel a ton of gratitude personally, but I feel that for a lot of other people who've been affected by what we did.
100%. And it's not an easy thing to start off, right? And so I'm sure as much as the highlight reel that the social media portrays of the business world, it didn't always start out like this for you. Were there ever moments where, or even let's dive through your journey as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, even a lawyer, right? Let's take it back and take us back to where it all started.
Well, I went to U of M. I got a Bachelor of Arts degree, and I thought I was going to be, I thought I was probably headed to be a prof, political studies prof. My dad was a lawyer, and he convinced me that getting a law degree, no matter what you do in life, is probably the best education anybody could get, no matter what you do. And he was right. And I wound up going to law school. I went to law school in California. I sort of I couldn't get into any law schools in Canada because of my LSAT score.
Oh,
Okay.
It was different back then, but I just couldn't get in.
Okay.
And I went to California, and then I sort of had to fight my way back and sort of overcome regulatory obstacles with an American law degree.
Yeah.
And then I went into criminal law. And in criminal law, most of the clients did what they're accused of doing. Not everybody's Perry Mason. And so you have to come to terms pretty quickly with, you're not going to win.
Right.
Like, your client's not going to be acquitted all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, your client's probably guilty. I think my biggest experience there, I had some amazing experiences. Doing criminal law. I got to travel all over Manitoba. I was doing circuit court work in rural Manitoba. And then I sort of stumbled into representing David Milgaard in one of Canada's probably most notorious wrongful conviction cases.
Yeah.
And although the ending to that story is it's sort of happy, but it's bittersweet happy.
Right.
Because he should never have gone to prison for 23 years. There were a lot of low points along the way. We were not successful many times along the way. And that was very, very challenging. And so it taught me early that life was not always going to be a bed of roses, and you better prepare for adversity.
Right.
In that case, it was very public as well. So when we tripped and fell, everybody knew that it was happening. And I sort of didn't have the benefit at that point of failing privately or failing quietly and learning along the way. And it taught me a good lesson because everything that came after I finished practicing law, I went into business. We had lots of ups, lots of downs, and all that life experience, I think, was very valuable.
And then where do you go from law after doing countless cases, I can imagine, and all those ups and downs? Where does the idea of becoming a businessman, entrepreneur start?
Well, so once we got David out of prison and solved the crime, I was so disillusioned with the justice system that I found it very hard. I loved being a lawyer. I still identify, my heart is very much identified as being a lawyer. But I was so disillusioned with the system that I needed to get out. And, to be honest, I'd also, when you're a criminal defense lawyer, you need to be 100% in your lane defending the accused without judgment. And I found that I started to at least think about the character or the nature of what my clients, who they were. And that was starting to take the edge off my ability to go 100%. And I knew in my heart that if there's the slightest deviation from what you're supposed to do in the justice system, your role as the defense lawyer, it was best for the system, best for the client to step away. So at the time, my dad, I was looking at many other options, and my dad had built CanWest Global media business into a pretty big thing, and we talked about it, and he said, well, why don't you come into the business? So I did. And literally, I think maybe within a week of joining the business, they were in the middle of looking at a TV network in Australia. And this is why he proves out, getting a legal education is the best, because they said, okay, you're going to Australia. And I was assigned to the legal due diligence in Australia. So we were looking at the broadcast regulatory rules, the banking, the finance, the tax rules within Australia, doing business in Australia. and I spent many weeks in Australia as part of that due diligence team. We then bought the network. We then had to do the financing, and I had to learn from a legal perspective how to write up an offering memorandum to raise money, because we had to raise money to do it. And then I spent almost 20 years in CanWest doing a variety of roles. I actually ran television stations in Saskatchewan and oversaw a pretty interesting leading edge technology experiment with Sony. And then I got into programming and production, and I was overseeing all the programming for Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
Wow.
And then I got shipped off to England to start up a national talk radio network. Then I led a bid for Channel 5 in the UK for a national TV network, which we won, but we weren't British enough, so they kicked us out. But at some point in there, I decided that I didn't think this was my long-term position, and I really, as I say, when I was in university, I thought I might be a political studies prof. And I got to a point where, I had sort of gotten into the process. The process of business is you get information, you have to process it pretty quickly, and then make a decision and move on. And a lot of time there wasn't time for reflection or deeper analysis, because you're really dealing in the moment. So I went back to U of T and got a master's in law, and I thought, okay, I think I want to be a prof again. I'm back to where I was, in the late 70s, and I did. CanWest started to have trouble when the financial markets melted down in the late 2000s, 08, 09, 10, and it eventually succumbed to its creditors. But by then I was already moving on into academia. And I taught law for 4 years at the U of M in the Faculty of Law. But then I got itchy again, and a former colleague presented a proposal to do a consolidation of pharmacies, of drugstores in rural Western Canada. So we went into that business for 5 years, and we acquired many pharmacies across Western Canada, and then we had an opportunity to sell it, and we did. Made a nice exit.
Is the exit public?
No. Well, the fact that we sold is public, but it was
the amount is not public.
The amount is not public.
it was a good investment. And then I was sort of trying to think of what to do, and I dabbled a little bit with the Manitoba Tech Accelerator with a number of smaller investments in Manitoba. And then one day, as COVID had sort of swept over the world, I got a call about whether I would be interested in taking an acting position as the Dean of Law. And I'd already started thinking about, well, maybe I should just go back, and go back into the university, and that was a great life. And so I took that position. It was probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, trying to lead the law school in turmoil and with COVID. And I'm very lucky that I had a fantastic staff. I had fantastic student leadership who collaborated with us. There were a number of things that were very problematic in the faculty, but all the internal issues layered on with COVID, there came a point midway through my term as acting dean, and we were doing a lot of stuff on Zoom. So it was trying to lead internal turmoil and some change without personal connection, without being able to sit and talk to people, was really, really difficult. But there came a point, and I think this happened with a lot of students, probably midway through COVID, where I realized that my cognition, there was so much coming at me, and it was all on Zoom, and it was back to back, where I realized that my brain was, I just was not absorbing
Oh, yeah.
anything.
Yep.
And I would get to, noon and not even know what had happened from 8 o'clock that morning.
Yep.
And that was a really scary moment. Part of it was my lack of familiarity with academic administration, because that was a whole new world. And then I had all these other issues, and I'd never been in that position before in my life, where I was just overwhelmed.
Right.
And so I was very grateful for that opportunity, but I was even happier when they found a permanent dean and I was able to take some time off. It took me quite a while to decompress from that.
Right.
And then I sort of drifted toward a couple of businesses that I'm in now. One is called Vexit, which is an online platform that's designed to provide affordable legal and accounting financial services to people in the middle market who can't afford lawyers or accountants. And we're just getting that rolling. And then basketball came along,
Yeah.
and we started to look at that. So that's sort of an abbreviated journey.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a span of many years condensed into a few short minutes. And one thing I take away from the story is that you were very self-aware of like the like circumstance you were in. For example, you were saying, "Oh, I didn't feel the passion," or I started to feel judgment." Where did that like personal development come in? Being aware at that level.
I'm very lucky. My mom was very important in that. She didn't know how important, but even as a little kid, like even as a very little kid, when she would give me birthday cards or birthday presents or whatever, she would always include the line from Shakespeare, "To thine own self be true, and above all else, to thine own self be true." And at the time, I'm thinking, like, Mom, just give me the present. Where's the cake? Like, where's the cake? I don't need philosophy here. I don't I just want the goodies.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to me until later in life, where it's such a crucial lesson.
Yeah.
Where you do have to be true to yourself, and you do have to be authentic. You can pretend for a little while, and I pretend all the time. For example, I pretend to be to fulfill the role of an extrovert ideal.
Right.
Okay, so I can do the PR and the glad handing, the shake. That's not really what I am. I'm an introvert, and so you have to be true to yourself and know that. You have to know, I'm not bookish. I'm not an academic. I'm not scholarly. I'm not particularly cerebral. And once you get comfortable with who you are, you got to be able to look in the mirror every morning at yourself and say, this is what I am.
Yeah.
And stop. If you try to be something that you're not, I think that sets you up for a lot of frustration.
100%. Yeah.
So, I'm just a schmo, and I'm okay with that.
I wouldn't say that, but there's you've attained these roles of, like, let's say the dean of law, right? And there's so many moments, even in my life as a student, I'm like presented with so many opportunities where it's like you have to kind of fake it to rise to the occasion almost. And it's like, well, if you're not going to do it, then who else is going to do it, right? You're in that spot. And so I feel like it's also a privilege at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a privilege,
right?
But you also have to be very mindful of what you've learned along the way. Correct. Everything. I mean, I treat everything, even all my biggest mistakes, have a learning component.
Yeah.
And I'm a very, very big believer in lifelong learning, not book learning necessarily, but taking in your life experience and knowing what it is and understanding what's happening. And even when you fail, okay, what did I learn from that?
Yeah.
So that when those opportunities present themselves, you can pretty reasonably assess, could I do this?
Right.
Or even if you have doubts and you know that it's a stretch, at least you know that it's going to be a stretch. so you can gird for it and you can prepare for it. So, you know, when they asked me to be the acting dean of the law school, I knew that was going to be a big stretch.
Right.
But I also knew that I had a lot of experience with organizational change, management change, change management in business. I'd been a member of the faculty. I knew most of the people. So, you know, I mean, so when you get that opportunity, you say, you know, can I do that? And if you're being true to yourself, you can say, okay, I think I can do that.
Yeah.
Turns out that I didn't know what I was getting into. And it turns out that I was able to do it for a short period of time, but I was also self-aware enough to know they better get somebody who does know what they're doing here, so that I can move on here.
Yeah. Wow. It seems as like when you go through the resume, there's a lot of like successes, of course, right? It's great to acknowledge those successes and give, you know, the props to yourself, but I'm sure there was a lot of failures as well. You mentioned, you know, when times are hard, when there's failures, you have to be true to yourself. What are some of those failures? What is something that really struck you either early in your career or later on that really put a toll on you?
You know, I mean, the fact that I couldn't get into the U of M law school
Yeah.
was a huge failure to me, because I'm a born and bred Winnipeg, Manitoba, and this is where I wanted to go to law school. That was a huge failure.
How old were you at the time?
Like early 20s, or
Okay.
sorry, mid 20s.
Yeah.
Mid 20s.
Around
But in those days, the LSAT was on an 800 score.
Okay.
And the rule was that, and I had written an LSAT that was adequate, probably would have gotten me into a fair number of schools. But the rule was that if you wrote it again and went down 100 points, your second score stuck. It wasn't an average.
Yeah.
And I went to an LSAT prep course and studied like even harder than I had done for the first time, and I went down 100 points, more than 100.
Oh, wow.
So I was stuck with that second test, and that was a huge failure to me, huge failure. And then to get rejected, like one after another, letter after letter after letter from every single law school, was just devastating to me. I mean, I dropped out of high school. I was a terrible student in high school, and I went to work and I sold clothes at Tip Top Tailors. And, you know, I did comparatively well as a commission salesperson, wound up buying a motorcycle that was way too big for me, and I crashed it, nearly killed myself. And I missed a year of school because I dropped out. I nearly killed myself. I had to restart my career, my school career there. You know, with the Milgaard case, when we got turned down, we made 2 applications to the Minister of Justice. The first application was rejected, was turned down, even after we had identified who turned out to be the real killer.
Right.
And I had to go. David was having a lot of psychological issues, and he had been sequestered at Stony Mountain Penitentiary into isolation. And his mental condition was degrading. And when the Minister of Justice turned us down on our application, I had to be the one to go into the prison and tell him. And so you go in the front door, I'm already feeling horrible. And you go deep, deep, deep into the institution, into a single room. And I see this poor guy, you know, really struggling with his mental health. And I have to tell him the bad news. And I took a lot of, I felt it wasn't my fault, I don't think, but I took a lot of responsibility for the fact that we did not succeed. And the interesting thing in that moment, and I've told this story many times, is that David was the one who gave me the buck up little soldier speech. Like he came out of his sort of degraded mental state, and he said, okay, and then he gave me the, okay, we're going to go harder now, right? And he sort of encouraged me. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had some very, very low points, and you rally, like you have to rally. And this was an interesting discussion amongst the deans when COVID hit, about adversity,
Right.
about the learning value. What is the potential learning value of COVID for young people at university and for ourselves? Which which was the whole lesson about adversity, and how do you manage adversity? And I'm going to be loose with my words here, but one way is to go and hide. Okay,
We got you.
Yeah.
the other way is to figure out, no, I'm actually going to go look into that wind, and how can I manage that? What do I need to do? And fortunately, over my life, I've had adversity.
Right.
And so, and the other thing about adversity is you need to know, is it so bad that I should give up and move on to something else? Or is it just, did I just trip on a stair?
Right.
And do I keep going? And that's one of the things you learn. I mean, I've got the benefit of this long past now because I'm so old, where I can say this, but for young people, when you're in the moment, it's often hard to take a failure, a momentary failure, or to take adversity and understand that this actually could be a good building block, and it's really important.
But it feels like the end of the world.
Yeah.
It does in the moment.
Yeah.
And when you're young, and when you're in school, when you're starting your career, it's unless you can understand that it's a stepping stone, and you can learn from it and move on, because that's what I've done. Mostly.
How does one move on and learn from their failure, right? Like, I'm sure it's so easy for all these kids going through COVID through university or even school, or simply getting cut from their basketball soccer team tryouts. Like, there's failures everywhere, but a lot of people either let those failures break them or they let them make them. And so how does one go from learning from that failure and applying those lessons into their life?
I think that it's I want to say it's partly compartmentalization. It's partly sort of saying, okay, that happened. It's not going to own me. And I'm not going to allow it to creep too much into my head. I had a kid who I've had, all my kids at one point got cut.
Yeah.
Getting cut is terrible.
Yeah.
And not only was it terrible because they thought they should be on the team, but it severely impacted their social network.
Yeah.
In sports.
Absolutely.
And I saw how they were starting to allow it to creep larger than it really was. And I just think you just have to, there's a mental discipline.
Right.
There's a learning discipline, which is, okay, that happened. I'm putting it in a box. That box is going over here. What did I learn from it? Next.
Right.
Right? And keep going. You've got to, and they used to laugh at the law school when I was the acting dean, because every day was a torrent
Right.
of things happening, bad things happening, changing dynamics, ambiguity, and I was processing stuff constantly with some of my staff and with the faculty and with the students, and I got to the point where I was ending all of my communications with the word in capital letters, onward, which is, okay, whatever just happened, whatever we just did, forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Keep the machine going forward.
Wow.
I mean, like you said, learning from all the experiences, and like even hearing your story with the first part that you mentioned, you saying that, oh, I took some of my law background and I moved that into tech. And I think the one interesting thing that when we spoke on the phone was the UMFM radio station, or CJM. You were a part of that as well. We are currently hosted by them.
Yeah.
What was the transition into like the world of radio station tech media?
So that was a pretty funny story. I forget the guy's name who was the news director at CJUM. But I just walked in one day and said, "Who's doing the news?" And he said, "I guess you are." And I wound up doing that 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
And I'm going to connect this to the Sea Bears. And so I started writing, preparing, and reading the 6 o'clock news. And it was at a time when Winnipeg had a very famous mayor for many, many years, a guy named Steve Juba. He was the visionary who imagined a monorail,
Right.
a rapid transit monorail down Portage Avenue going east-west. And Juba was retiring after an illustrious career, and he would not talk to any media. He just refused to talk to any of the media except me, except CJ. So I got the last interview with Steve Juba. It was like quite a coup to get it. And it was a fantastic experience because, as I say, I walked in, I didn't know anything. And, you know, Paul, I can't remember his last name, he said, "Okay, the whole deal here is there's stuff happening in the world. We have to decide what might be of interest to our listeners, and we have to try to tell it in a way that they'll want to hear it."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay, all right. So let's start monitoring the news. Let's start writing the news. Let's start producing the news." And then we had to do little promos, 15s, 30s, and we had to start writing copy. You know, and so that's like in 78 maybe, 77, 78. Now I take that dot and I go all the way to Winnipeg Sea Bears. When Winnipeg Sea Bears started to really take off, and we saw that this was going to be bigger than we thought, we had to expand our advertising and promotion campaigns way beyond what we thought. So we started advertising on radio. We started advertising in radio where we didn't think we would be advertising in radio, and we decided, okay, Asper, you should be part of the pitch, man. This is your business. People should see that you're out there pitching it. So I got to write copy. I got to write script. And we have to do it last minute.
Right.
Sitting in the studio, okay, how many words in a 15? How many in a 30?
Yep.
And I'm thinking, oh, I've done this. I remember back at CJUM when we were doing this, and like it comes back like this, and off you go.
It's crazy how
Which is like I'm just saying, everything that you do, you don't understand it when you're young,
right.
because it's all coming at you in real time until you get to a certain point where you realize, wow,
Yeah.
all that stuff does matter.
Yeah, and it's like even with us running the show for about 2.5 years now, it's like I can apply I'm the one who writes the description of the episodes, right? So it's like, oh well, like at my work, I'll be like, oh, you got to write like a 30-word quick description on something. It's like, okay, good, I've done this for 106 episodes, like.
And it's an incredibly valuable tool,
Right.
because to this day, and it's partly the discipline of writing 15s and 30s and understanding media communications and messaging. It's partly lawyering. And I used to teach this when I was on the faculty at the law school. Too many people try to talk to you or explain something to you in dense, incomprehensible language. And to me, as soon as somebody starts doing that, I'm thinking they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
And so the skill of being able to take a complicated thing and explain it in plain language is absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial, whether it's, you know, in this media context or whether it's in any other context.
Right.
And you actually present yourself far superior to all the people with all the jibber jabber and gobbledygook, right?
Right.
And you know, I used to get the law students to do that. Okay, what's a black hole in space? Now tell me about that in a way that I can understand. Simplify that. What are we talking about?
And then that really shows if you actually understand the concept as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
The reason I smile when you mentioned the you walking into CJUM or UMFM and being like, who's doing the news? Our story is very similar. We were walking through University Center and we just saw the booth set up, and then we're like, yo, should we start a pod? And then they go,
What do you want to talk about?
what do you want to talk about? And we go, everything. They're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then so
The first reaction was, oh, you can't really talk about everything, right? And it's like, and I'm like, oh, hey, maybe we gotta market it correctly. Like we literally said the word everything.
Listen, do you want to know my brilliant idea? Through COVID, and as we were struggling to manage IT and technology and remote learning and all that stuff, I could see. I said to a bunch of people, "You've got UMFM there,
Yeah.
which is a legit, full-blown radio station. Let's create something for U of M called UM."
Okay.
Through and use the platform, the radio platform, add video,
Yeah.
and we're going to create not just a learning platform, but an alumni engagement platform.
That's brilliant.
And let's broaden what UMFM does and call it UM and make it actually a legit media contender in this market. When you think about the U of M population and the alumni population, and you think about lifelong learning and interesting things that are going on within the university community, the interesting things that students are doing, alumni. There's content there like crazy. So anyway, it was
That's a brilliant.
That's a off-camera conversation.
no, I think that I've often thought, okay, well, at some point, I may circle back and come back to UMFM and say, all right.
Yes.
Well,
we love
maybe
that. We
this
love
is
that.
your connection point. We're coming back.
Okay, all right. How do we put a turbocharger on that?
I was fascinated, even on the phone when you were like, "Oh, I was 6 car coach."
No, that's
How is
funny
that
though. You
possible?
guys just walk in. Yeah. Well, that's what happens, right? But you know, to your credit, like you have to have the courage
Right.
to go walk in.
It was the idea first, and then it was like, okay, how do we actually do it?
Yeah.
And so.
But that's a big step. A lot of people have great ideas. There's no end of great ideas.
Of course.
But the sort of the courage to act on it is really great, and good on you guys for doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then through that, even when COVID started and everything, we could go to the station.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, let's just do it at home.
Yeah.
And then so everything you see here, and we had a studio before.
Well, it's like
this as
pirate
well.
radio.
Yeah.
We
It's
tried.
like those radio stations that used to be on ships off the shore of England,
Yeah.
right? So yeah.
I'm always fascinated by leadership. I've over the last year, I've personally grown my involvement through the Faculty of Engineering, through the leadership communities that we have there. I want to get into your mindset of leadership. I think you've climbed the ladder of what leadership can be in business, academia, and the world in general. So let's talk about what it means to be a leader and what a true leader is.
There's a ton of scholarship now on leadership, and you can actually learn and go to school about leadership. For me, I got leadership. I fluked into leadership things very early in my career, and some big ones.
Right.
So I've been volunteering, for example, at the folk festival, and I was a schlepper. I was one of the backstage people that moved musicians around from stage to stage. And the folk festival was having some financial trouble. They convinced me to go on the board of directors. I'd never really been on a real board of directors at that point. I was a lawyer, but I'd never been on the board of directors. I go on the board of directors and very quickly find out, surprise, it's worse than we told you.
Right.
Okay, and then the next thing that happens is they make me president or chair of the board. And now I'm in the middle of a serious crisis where there's a squeeze on government funding. Our sponsors were not supplying enough funding. Our spending was too high. Okay, like existential problem. And I think that's the first experience I had where it was very intuitive.
Right.
And I'll tell you the dynamics. There was a very, very strong, heartfelt founding group of the Winnipeg Folk Festival who felt very passionately that it was their baby.
Right.
There was another group who felt that big change had to happen. And some of that change ran contrary to the founding vision. And I became the leader in that situation, and with no experience. But I think that I had enough empathy and I think I had enough patience to identify what the business issues were, what the landscape, what the environment was, the people environment, and the appetite for change, and sort of the technique for effecting change. And there were some tough things that had to be done, but I learned very quickly that you're not going to get anything done unless you're acutely attuned to to the environment.
Right.
And that taught me probably the best lesson in leadership, because we were able to then, I mean, people were upset along the way. Leadership is almost always, in my experience, leadership, if you're going to act as a leader, some people are not going to be happy.
Correct.
And you have to accept that.
Right.
And if you can't accept that, and you constantly want everybody to be unanimous or have consensus, it's really hard to be a leader in that situation, especially where there's change management occurring. So we got those changes done and implemented. There were some people who were not happy, but it actually set the folk festival. And then I was, I had served my term, and I stepped away, and a successor came in, and the folk festival has become extraordinarily successful. But it could not have happened. Maybe just dumb luck, but without really paying attention to like what was going on around and what was achievable. And then that happened again when Gary Dewar asked me to go in and lead the Blue Bombers when they were in severe financial difficulty. It was the same thing all over again. And so that sort of, that leadership, it's partly intuitive, as I say, but that's how I do it.
Yeah.
That's how I do it.
Is it more of like, this great leader that I look up to, Simon Sinek, he says, you're a people's person at the end of the day, right? Leadership is about taking care of the people that you are working with you and working alongside you, right? So was that basically a part of your leadership style, is understanding your folks and putting their best foot forward?
Well, here's the secret. Leadership, to me, is what's the end goal?
Right.
What is our end goal? And you have to be very open-minded about understanding what that end goal is. And once you're comfortable with what it is, and it could be short, medium, long term, like there could be punctuations along the way. It doesn't have to be sort of the whole tamale right away. Once you get comfortable with those objectives, then you go to the how. Like I say, you can be a people person. You have to be objective driven. You have to be organization driven. You have to have people understand what's in it for them. But invariably, there are going to be people who are not aligned. And if you don't have the spine to drive through to the objectives that serve the organization best, then you can get paralyzed.
Right.
How do you have those difficult conversations? Like, in terms of whether it's a business partner, whether it's your coworkers or someone below you, in terms of letting them know that this is not how it's going to go?
I'm going to come back to my mom's birthday cards. It's the to thine own self be true conversation. Okay? It's when you say to people who aren't comfortable with where the change is going, you either have to be true to yourself, whether you can join in with the rest of us, or if you can't, and there's no point in resisting, because you're going to put us in a very difficult position. If you want to make a change and get out of this environment, we want to help you do that. I will help you do that. And I've done that every single time where somebody, and they don't necessarily have the acceptance right away that they're not going to be part of it. So when you have the to thine own self be true, they want to pretend, oh no, I can get along, I can get along. But if somebody refuses to use a computer, you're not going to get along. Okay, this is not going to work. Right? And that's a people thing. Because as I say, I'm equally concerned about the organizational objectives as I am about a person who might get very isolated as the organization goes in a different direction.
So what do you think the best structure is? Because I know, right, like you want to be, as a leader, you want to be the friend of all. But then again,
No, you can't be the friend of all.
Right.
If you're going to be the leader,
Yeah.
as I say, you're not going to be the friend of all.
Right. And so what is the best structure to go deal with that? Like, obviously, I've had to make people disappointed, right? And that's fine. That's part of what your role entails, right?
I think that honesty and authenticity
Right.
is always the best way. And I think that anytime you assume any kind of leadership position, you get everybody together and you say, okay, here's who I am. Here's, I'm always self-deprecating because, like I said to you at the beginning, I'm not the smartest person in the room by any stretch.
Yeah.
And I'm very capable of making mistakes. I'm creative. I've got ideas that flow out of my brain, and I need people to tell me that I'm an idiot when I have a bad idea, without fear.
Right.
And I just think you need to have an open conversation with people about, okay, organizational objectives, you've got to feel free. It's got to be a free atmosphere for input.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's very wise, I would say.
Well, it's too often leaders, there's I don't know if it's insecurity, but you get cloistered.
Right.
And even with Sea Bears, they laugh. I mean, they were afraid of me probably at the beginning because they thought, oh, here's the owner. But we built a rapport very quickly where, I would walk in with some harebrained idea and they got very quickly comfortable, even if it was just a look, like, are you out of your mind? Everybody felt okay to do that. And that builds a great working environment.
I think that's kind of what you need to be an effective organization. Is you don't need everyone telling you yes, yes, yes. You need people telling you to be wrong, right? And that's what creates those ideas and allows them to flourish into something beautiful.
Yeah. And to understand the mission.
Right.
What's our collective mission? Everybody's going to have a role in some way, but what's our overall mission? Right. We're still evolving. We're just a very young organization, but the relationship, the hierarchical relationship where you can break it down as much as possible. I mean, ultimately somebody has to make decisions.
Right.
But where you can have free flow of information, I think that's the best.
How do you keep your employees or your team members or your colleagues hooked on that vision? Like, we have a vision, right? And we say Voice of Winnipeg. That's our vision.
Yeah.
And so people behind the camera, behind the scenes that lead this organization, how do we personally, just being a little selfish here, how do we keep them hooked?
Well, you have to live it.
Right.
You do have to live it. And so I'm not wearing my Sea Bears stuff now, but we live the Sea Bears mission.
Right.
And we wear the stuff, and we're constantly thinking, and we're constantly communicating, and we're thinking about, okay, 2020, like we're already into 2024.
Yeah.
We didn't have time. Like in this past season, we did not have time to think about anything.
Yeah.
We could not think about mission or purpose or vision or anything else. Everybody was just hanging on, trying to manage the overwhelming public support. Now we get to plan it.
Right.
And I think it's very much like when I realized, for example, that I was losing my edge in criminal law, of which lane. If you start to wane on the vision, there's ways to try to revive it.
Right.
But it also may be that you're moving on and starting to think about other things. And so, when that happens, you can't hang on. And my dad always used to say, you never fall in love with the bricks and mortar in life. I mean, I guess, your partner maybe you fall in love with, and that's the bricks and mortar. But for everything else, it might end.
Right.
And don't be afraid of that.
Right.
I was just gonna transition the conversation. Like you mentioned that you didn't have a lot of time for the Sea Bears. What was the whole process of building the Sea Bears? Like, how did that start? When did it start? Did you get a call? You mentioned many times you were like, "Oh, I just got a call to be the dean of the faculty of law." Was it a call, a conversation? What was?
No. My brother actually tipped me off and suggested, because I was looking really to retire.
Okay.
Like I own a little tree farm west of the city, and I love being out there. And I thought, maybe it's time for me to just wander around aimlessly and listen to 70s music. And my brother said, you should see what's going on with this CEBL, with this basketball league. It's like, it seems to be catching on in Canada. So I did that last spring, and then last summer I spent the summer going to games all across the country.
Okay.
And I've told this story publicly. I'm not a basketball person, so I don't understand the technical aspects, the X's and O's of the sport. I think I do have a good eye for entertainment and for athleticism. So when I can, I think I can see when something is good athletics. And I was quite blown away. I was blown away by the game presentation, like the event. The game itself seemed very credible basketball, lots of alley-oops and slams and mistakes, but mistakes create broken plays, and there was excitement on the court. And the thing that was most overwhelming to me was the people who were there. And who was there was what I have called the new Canada, which is a mix of the legacy white basketball crowd and then all kinds of new Canadians, first, second, third generation new Canadians of all stripes and colors.
Right.
And grandparents and little kids and everything in between, having a good time. And there, because it was a good time, not living and dying with whether the team won or lost. And what I saw was the emergence of, and I mean, this makes it sound too big and fancy, but for the newcomer, whatever generation, to have a shared common experience in Canada around a pro sports thing is a massively important social driver.
Right.
Because if your pro sport shared common experience is limited to hockey or football, and people don't necessarily like those sports, how do we what's our vehicle to find another way? And I was just blown away by it. And my grandparents were immigrants.
Right.
I mean, they came here from Ukraine, and they had a huge integration problem. My dad was part of that, and so I thought, okay, you know what? If this has any semblance of business sense, I think there's a bigger purpose here. So we started. We did the negotiations, and we concluded things by the end of the summer, I think, or early fall. But there were a number of other things happening with the league, so we couldn't actually announce the team until the end of November. Okay. And we had no staff. We had nobody. And then we went into December, and you can't hire really. We found employee number one, Megan Noonan. Okay. I think she applied. I think we hired her December 27th. And I was talking to her the other day. I think she started January 6th. So it was me, and I wasn't working in it, Jason Smith, who's our president, and Megan in January to play in May. Okay. And we had to get a general manager and a coach. Yeah. And then we had to hire up the rest of the staff. And that happened progressively, but it took us way longer. And then all of a sudden, training camp, right? Like January to May is no time.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that if it had unfolded at the scale that we thought, which was much smaller, we were probably equipped for that. Right. We were nowhere near expecting it to get as big as it got. And to their credit, the staff just stepped up. The staff we eventually hired over the 3 months that we had to get ready. Yeah. I mean, they massively stepped up. As we're recording this, they've begun their recovery week. Jason Smith
You mentioned
and I agreed. Yeah, they get an extra free week of holidays just to try to get their heads screwed on again.
How do these logistics work?
I was just gonna ask that.
like, who do you call to start a basketball team? Like, how does this work? Like, it seems like there's a lot of steps that I'm
Very complex. It was very complex because we like the big issue for Winnipeg was where to play.
Yeah.
And we were originally, looking at a variety of places. And when I went into the basketball community and started talking to people, the word came back very, very strongly that it needed to be central, someplace in the middle of Winnipeg.
Right.
Do not pick a north, a south edge place. Okay, and that made things very difficult. And because there is only one place. And we tried, we looked at could we reconfigure Sport for Life, and would never work because of all the other programming that goes on in there. So that left only one place. And to their credit, when we called Mark Chipman and Kevin Donnelly and John Olford at True North, they were open to it, and then we made a deal. And once we made that deal, we now knew that we were going to have the benefit of the big hung scoreboard and the ribbon, and we could do game day production.
Yeah.
And even at a smaller scale. So we had originally planned full capacity to be 5,300 with a horseshoe kind of bowl, and that was very manageable. Well, okay, so game one we had 7,400 or something. So we had to that plan was kind of blown out of the water.
Yeah.
And then it dipped a little bit, and then in the back half of the season it exploded again.
Yeah.
And so that was only possible because we made the deal with True North. Yeah. And I said when we announced it at the time, people gripe and complain. Government money went into it, and there's still benefits going to True North. It is a massively important public asset, whether it's privately owned or not. It is a massively important public asset, and we're very grateful that we got a chance to go in there.
Is it you pitching them on the idea,
Yeah.
or are they like?
It was
Like,
it was me calling Mark and initially, and then Jason and Kevin Donnelly eventually made the deal. But I said, okay, Mark, here's a crazy idea.
Just walked into the room.
I got a crazy idea, and his immediate reaction was,
Oh boy.
well, no, because their business cycle for hockey is they're selling hockey right now.
Yeah.
They don't want any any distractions. Yeah. That's their core business.
Of course.
And I said, okay, no, we'll look after it. You just have to agree to let us try and make a deal.
Yeah.
And he said, thumbs up, let's do it.
So what does those negotiations look like? Are you allowed to talk numbers or
No.
no numbers? Okay, well, what
No, but it tied into. So one of the reasons why True North was so willing to talk about this was because it tied into bigger public policy objectives of both the provincial government and the city government to try to revive activity downtown, and bring people downtown.
That makes sense.
And I think you guys did that very well.
Yeah, it was an enormous success. It worked it worked phenomenally well. So we did two things. We located our business offices and our training and practice facilities at Sport for Life Center, which is in the East Exchange. All our players lived, for the most part, in the East Exchange in apartments there. So we created activity there. Wow. And then we created the second hub of activity at Canada Life Center for both pregame and during the games. And then after the games, you could go to any number of bars or restaurants in the area after the games, and they were full of Sea Bears people.
That's very strategig, right? I would assume.
So as I say, the conversation with Mark, who's long been an advocate, for revived downtown, it's in his own interest. Was once we sort of realized, okay, let's give it a shot, see what happens. Then the rest was, it was pretty straightforward.
Looking at this from an outside perspective, the first question is, well, that guy's got to make a lot of money, right? So what is looking at it from the public eye? What is true wealth? Like, we look at these business people and they're like, oh, I got a $60 million yacht, and it's like I'm living a 25,000 square feet mansion, and you see this ideal
have any
life.
of that.
But what is, in terms of your definition, what is true wealth and what it means to be wealthy?
Well, people, first of all, so part of the calculus with Sea Bears moving downtown was that it magnified the risk
Right.
significantly.
If it fails.
Like if nobody had shown up,
Yeah.
this would have been a very, very different story. As more people show up and we had to scale up the business, the costs went up.
Right.
So, there's an illusion, oh, you had all these people, you must be rolling in dough. There's two parts to that. Number one is, we had massively increased operating costs
Right.
because we wanted to continue to invest in the show and in the event and build it bigger. Cardinal Offishell was at the final game. I mean, that costs money, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to do that, but it costs money. So obviously, in order for us to be sustainable, in order for this to last, two things have to happen. The league has to be sustainable, and the league has to survive, and this has to be a successful business.
Right.
It has to be a profitable business. And I think it's going to take us still a few years to build it up,
Right.
because there's so many things that we want to do. We want to be investing in the community, okay? We want to be developing youth programs. We didn't really have time to get into that, but that costs money. And it's an investment, I think, in our future.
Right.
But people, we've talked with our staff about this. We hit bigger and faster than we thought. But that doesn't change the original business model. It maybe lets us move a few things forward quicker, but this is a longer term. I see this as a longer term play. And when you say what is true wealth, is it, in this case, and I've said this already, I do want it to be a profitable business, because unless it's a profitable business, it's not going to work.
Right.
That's just the way it is. How do I pay people? How do I pay myself? I've invested a lot of money,
Right.
a lot of money to make this happen. But I think there's a bigger, as I said, I think there's a bigger purpose.
Right.
So if you can achieve profitability, if you can get a bit of a return on your investment, I said from the very beginning, we want to do well and we want to do good. And that's the real measure to me of success, is if you're doing well enough that you can do good in the community. And we're going to start that this year, and I hope we're going to continue it.
One question I have, just because we are, developing into the world of business, right? This is something we've started, and we hope to, reach the heights that you have one day. But would you say it's worth it? Would you say all the struggles and everything that you've been through, all the ups and downs, are you comfortable and happy with where you are?
Like, think about all the moments that,
like, is it worth it?
You've had like 1 hour's sleep, but you got to get up and go chase that grind.
It's funny. This question of happy is, of course, pervasive. Everybody wants to be happy. And, I come from, pretty dour Russian, Ukrainian grandparents who I remember my grandmother, one of my grandmothers being happy. Actually, both my grandmothers were happy and they used to have great laughs.
Yeah.
But both my grandfathers were pretty serious all the time.
Yeah.
And I even knew my great grandfather, who came over when they fled Russia. And I don't remember him ever laughing. And my dad kind of inherited that. And my uncle, who was a math teacher at Gordon Bell High School, he was a pretty serious person too. And you never knew whether they were happy. They never exhibited any outward signs of what is happy. And so I don't even know what happy is. I just think that as long as you're not doing something that you hate,
Right.
that you find yourself unable. So, my measure is always this. This is a lesson that I've taught students, and I tell people all the time. when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror and whatever you're going to have to do that day, if you can't say it's game day, it's game day, and I'm going to go and I'm going to like it's game day, and I'm focused and I'm going to get this day and I'm going to own this day, carpe diem. Then you're probably doing the wrong thing, right? And it doesn't mean you have to be doing it every day because of course you got crappy days. So I think happy isn't euphoric. It isn't utopian. It's I'm pretty good with what's happened.
Would you say it's a choice? Like you can choose to be happy?
I think there's I think there's a big chunk of that. Again, but that's okay. That's getting up in the morning, looking at yourself in the mirror, and saying, "This is what I am.
Yeah.
I'm okay. And that's okay, right? That's what I am."
Yeah.
And with this basketball team, we're not ever going to be the NBA.
Yeah.
Okay, we're like, so we get up in the morning, we look at ourselves, we say, we're not going to be the NBA. We're not going to be that big or fancy or any of that. We're just going to be who we are. We did that with the Bombers. We got up every morning and we said, okay, we're the Blue Bombers. We're the CFL. We're not going to be the NFL. That's who we are, right? And you do it on an individual level as well.
But look at where it's gotten you now, right? It's
I think it's very empowering.
right.
I think it's
100%.
extremely empowering once you know, like, and I said, I am self-deprecating because I do see all the flaws in me, and whatever the public image is, I mean, I'm just a schmo. Like I got lucky maybe a few times. I've learned some lessons along the way. I've made tons of mistakes, and I'm okay with whatever that is. And even if people don't like it or whatever, I'm okay with it.
Why Winnipeg? Why this city? Like you said, there's, I'm sure you got opportunities. You were in California. You were, you had opportunities to go around the world and maybe an NBA team. Who knows, right? Like an NFL team. Why Winnipeg?
Be the A team?
Or sorry,
Did you just say that?
no, I said the NFL, the NBA team, NBA team.
Oh. I've had lots of opportunities, and there's some days in February that I regret not having lived and stayed in California for the rest of my life. But on the other hand, we were just talking the other day. I mean, I grew up loving winter. Winter, like weather, was never an issue for me because I love winter, and I just found that wherever I've gone and worked, and I've worked all around the world, I've worked all over Canada, and I've had some pretty amazing experiences. I just find that when I come back to Winnipeg, there's a sense of calm, a sense of familiarity. As soon as you hit the ground, as soon as you get to the perimeter highway,
It's home.
that is really important to me.
Yeah.
And that's been true for my whole life. And I just think it's important.
Is there anything, David, that today we haven't touched on? We like to make sure that, our guests have a valuable experience throughout this show. And so if you walk away today and you're like, man, I wish those guys asked me this one question, what would that question be?
You haven't asked me if I want to come back and do the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
You have,
Would you like to be a host? Would you
Who's
like to be a
running it? Who's running it?
Ooh, who's running the 6? Is it 6 though?
I don't know if this is...
We're at 11:30 a.m. So
we can change it to 6 a.m. You can hop on the show.
Oh, 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. I'm not doing news.
6
at 6 p.m. No chance. No chance.
Well,
I'm
anytime.
home. I'm
We would-
home draining coffee.
we
at
would
6
love
a.m.
to. When was the last time you were back at the radio station at U?
Probably 1979.
Okay, we'd love to.
1980.
We'd love to take
If you ever get a chance, we'd love to give you a tour of the newest place.
Yeah, is campus back open?
Yeah,
It's like
campus
everything
is
open.
Yeah.
100%. You let us know. We'd get you in the booth again.
Well, I was at the U of W U of M playoff basketball game
Yeah.
in April, I think it was, and there was still a mask mandate on campus.
Right.
I
I think they removed it. It's recommended now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They removed it as of summer.
Well, you talk about the will of the people. So everybody, the poor university staff are standing there at the doors as 3,200 people flow into investors group, and 3,198 people all said, "Go away.
Yeah.
I'm not listening to you. Screw off." And 2 people, the president of the university and his wife, walked through, and he had to.
Mr. Benner.
I mean, it was his, right?
Yeah.
So in this gym, and he wound up sitting right in front of us, and you got this gym full of people screaming and having a great time like a normal thing, and poor Michael and his wife sitting there with their masks on.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that's gone.
Any pieces of
No. I don't have anything else you didn't miss anything, I don't think.
any pieces of advice that you'd like to share with us or our audience that you think is very valuable and that they could take away to either achieve their goals or follow their passion?
We're in an interesting phase of life with society, and there's a lot of change going on, a lot of social change going on, and social media has amplified radical extremes as though that was something that's new.
Right.
Okay, and people are extremely worried because as I say, social media in particular sheds light on things that have always been there. Okay, this is not new.
Yeah.
And it's really important for the people, the vast majority of people, to, even if you sort of fall, regardless of where you fall on a particular issue on the political spectrum, it's super important, I think, to remember human, interpersonal relationships over and above the digital relationships that people have. And we are a social animal. The sapien is a social animal, and the forces that drive us apart are built on us actually being apart, physically apart. Because when you bring people together, I mean, sometimes it boils over, but you don't say things to people's face that you might find easier to say. And we saw this while I was dean, and I was just shocked at some of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
But it's not as bad. Things are not as bad as the prophets of doom always say.
Yeah.
Okay, and I grew up, and it's not to say that we're not facing climate change and we're not facing all these big issues, but I remember very vividly in the 70s, the big doomsday scenario was that the world's population was going to exceed the food supply,
Yeah.
and we were going to become extinct, or we were going to face mass famine and starvation. And everybody was there was a segment of the media and society that was all fixated on that. While I think that we do have problems, we're going to solve them better by collaborating, not isolating.
Right.
I was very, very unhappy, even though there was radical elements within COVID. I was very unhappy with the government reaction to some of the people who either didn't understand what was going on or who were not ill-willed, but just had a different perspective or a different view. And that's a great example. So what I say I've said to students always is, the important part is civility and interpersonal communication. That's how we're going to actually collaborate and solve things, not with a retreat. And it's okay. It's okay to disagree.
All right.
It's okay to have different views. That's a good thing, actually. And it's not the reason why you say, well, I'm not hanging out with those people anymore or that person anymore because their views I don't agree with their views. It's why you do.
All right.
That's true. Wow.
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on the show and sharing your wisdom with us.
Great to be here.
To the audience, if you haven't already, make sure to check out the Sea Bears, buy some tickets,
Tickets are on sale now.
Yeah.
Season tickets for 24.
There you go. Until next time, thank you so much for listening, viewing, liking, comment, and until next time, peace.
That's a wrap.
Okay.